because last week what did we talk? We looked at some refactoring, some really kind of like entry level refactoring, if you will. So we looked at one of the bash scripts that we have running our enrollment pipeline, and we started talking about how we can refactor that. And I should really kind of close that conversation and finish that up. But actually, today I was going to focus on a little bit different topic and talk a little bit about some new stuff in that our platform would ideally maybe evolve towards with a bit of time. Right now, how does Modern Apps Learning Platform work? Right, we're hosted on GitHub pages, and we use a static site generator called Hugo. Right, I think most of us are familiar with that, at least a little bit. Go hugo.io. Very, very nice. A really static site generator, and static site generators are often associated with a word, this Jamstack architecture. So if you're interested in Gemstack is one of the cool things about the Gemstack and static site generators is they are generally becoming the kind of sort of de facto way that students who are learning about how to become front-end developer, how to make websites. Not that you guys necessarily want to do that, but it's becoming one of the most common ways that people are teaching, because it's really easy to get started with Gemstack sites. Right? So if we go to Hugo and we go to themes, and you can just search and search and search. You don't have to want to do anything with front-end development. If you have some idea for some website, maybe your personal website, and maybe it is some project that you want to have potentially a little page for it, maybe not a big target destination, but there's also this kind of why not. I think we used to make a document or maybe we put something on a blog. I think one of the things that's changing in the world, is as it always has, is things get progressively easier to do newer things. Like I remember back in the day, right? Like back in the day, it was completely normal to have an internet that was predominantly random Word documents and MS Office documents. And what might be more modern than that, it is like now I think you go to a lot of, let's say, our technical content as inside of VMware. What do people create now? It's actually pretty good about that. It's not, there's an appropriate amount of like Office documents. Like if I want a PowerPoint, there's a bunch of PowerPoints on the internet, right? But if I want to find information, one of the big sources that I can find now that anybody in VMware can do is they got wiki pages on Confluence, right? And so now, if I think about an internet, if I saw an internet that I went and did search, and it's mostly all random Word documents and all types of information in Word documents, and I got to go through Word, that's going to be a legacy internet. Well, I think that as we go through time, we're going to start looking at things like Confluence and really static content that's ugly. As maybe a bit of a legacy approach. And right now it's easy to go and create a wiki page. Well, you see what's happening like with no code, with things like static site generators. It's getting easier and easier to make more, slightly more advanced things. And I think it's going to become a lot more common, where in the past someone might have thought, hey, I'm going to make a document, I'm going to create a Confluence page, like to potentially, maybe I'm going to grab, one of these things and really make a really nice little tiny site, little microsite. As it's super easy to do once you have a little familiarity with it. None of this requires really any development skills. The way to get started with Gemstack sites is you look through the themes that are available online, and there's thousands and thousands of templates out there, just for Hugo, for example, right? You pick the template that you want, you download it, and then you type in the word Hugo server, enter, right, and it'll pop this up, right? Just like it looks. And if you're able to find one that's very close to whatever it is that you're trying to do, Like here's a great example, Reveal Hugo. So what's Reveal, right? It's a way to make reveal.js presentations. So if you're interested in making something like a PowerPoint, but using HTML5, right? That's where reveal.js comes in. It gives you, it's this really nice framework to be able to create HTML5 compatible and dynamic PowerPoint style presentations, if you will. And here's a theme, I can get that and just use it, and I could have a web hosted presentation. So and since we have GitHub pages for free, I can take this, put this on some random GitHub repository, turn on a GitHub page, and then when I go to that website, it will be a web viewable version of something like a PowerPoint template. You could take and send that to a customer, right? And be like, look at me, I'm a modern customer. I'm not sending you this PowerPoint. I'm sending this URL, and you go to it, and it's a really beautiful PowerPoint presentation. And since it has, the whole web toolkit, you could make it, extra fancy if you want to. And Reveal's like really easy to use too, but use this template and you've got an instant just PowerPoint on the web that you can drop on GitHub pages very, very easily. And just so on and so forth. So it's really easy to get started. And one of the nice things is if you're interested in learning more about front end, like kind of as I've done, one of the things I did. So like here you see Doxy. Doxy is what all the courses. This is the template. All the courses are based off of this template. So what I did is I started with the template. It's pretty close to what you see, has most of the capabilities. When you go to one of our course sites, I mean, it's Doxy, right? Most of that I didn't have to hand code from scratch. I was able to use this template, and there's some tweaks that I wanted to make to get it the way I like. Some of them were really easy. They're the standard customization. Some of them were, hey, maybe I got to learn a little bit more. So you can have something usable, ready to go. And if you want to learn about how to tailor something or customize something, learn a little bit more advanced skill, you can do it, one step at a time. And so, yeah, these static site generators, but one of the interesting things about static site generators, right? These why do people keep calling me? Stop calling me. I'll turn my phone off. The static site generators started to create static sites that everyone thought of as these are going to be simplistic sites. We're not going to do things in this universe that are comparable to what we do on really, really complex sites or big enterprise sites. And that's really rapidly started to change as it turns out that, you can do more advanced stuff with these architectures. And as more and more people are doing more advanced web development with static site generators, turns out that the developers and the people working on it really, really like it a lot more by and large. There was a lot of challenges and complexities in the world of traditional web application and web content management. And using static sites as part of your architecture, Jamstack architecture, it really has. So now it's like if you go to Gemstack and look at our site generators, what happened is you see things like, okay, so next.js is the big dog right now, the biggest of them, and it's interesting because this is. Yeah, and there's some new ones that are coming online right now, and this is going to be among the most popular ways to deploy frameworks like React and what have you. So Next is one of the frameworks that allows you to put React applications and more advanced JavaScript, TypeScript, kind of like the most advanced stuff you can find in client-side frameworks, being able to put it in the context of a static site generator. But we're starting to see is the more popular static site generators now are no longer just doing static site generation. They're starting to become hybrids of what may, something that looks like, I'd say, like the next generation of what we're going to do on the server side as well, potentially. So we look at next.js, this is not just something that only does static sites. It also has server-side rendering, and the direction of kind of the latest, best web stuff on the cutting edge is these kind of hybrid approaches where we do, there's a few different keywords, but we do something called progressive hydration, which means we want to cache everything statically as much as we can on the client side, but then some things need to be dynamic. And so for the dynamic things, we want to have the ability. We want to have the ability to pick and choose. It's really great to put as much static content. If there is something that isn't going to change, the best way to handle that is to just pre-build it with a static site, a feature set. And once you've built and that's all that static stuff, that's the best way to get that to the client side. Now, then once the client side is up and running, then maybe it goes and grabs what it needs to dynamically at that point, and potentially through server side rendering of the web page. And so now we're seeing all this hybrid stuff happening. And one of them here that I'm gonna look at today is Gatsby. And we're going to look a little bit more at Gatsby. Why not next.js? Definitely going to look at next.js a little bit too. They're both extremely popular frameworks. But one of the, I think, reasons for the popularity of next.js is I think in the next.js community is more commonly doing those combinations of server side and client side rendering. Now, within this framework, and so I think of it's like, if we're wanted to learn a little bit more about these possibilities and get there from at least for myself, based on the knowledge I have today, I really wanted to have an intermediate step. As next.js, it's not quite as simple as some of the other frameworks where you just go and grab it. It can be, but there's a lot more complexity that exists in this, because there's a lot more people doing various hybrid new server side things, where Gatsby is still predominantly works like this model that I was saying before, where like with Hugo, you can find a ton of templates, you download the template that you want, you tweak it the way you want it, and then you're good to go. And Gatsby also has this massive plugin ecosystem. There's a lot of things that make Gatsby, I think, easier than Next. And so I think, if we're going to look at some of these different new technologies, I did not hit the record button, did I? I was talking about it. Dang it. So, oh, I did hit the record button. Never mind. I feel better. I always forget. So like, I'm always sitting there thinking about it. Anyways, so yeah, I want to look at Gatsby. Now, one of the things I like about this, I should take a step back, because the landscape is, I'm oversimplifying when some little parts of some of this landscape. So when I look at static site generation, I think that's part of something, this Jamstack architecture. And what is Jamstack architecture really? I would define it, I think, quite simply, as your Gemstack architecture is an architecture where we separate server side and client side development, typically, right? And so by that I mean that there's a lot of development frameworks where people may develop in one language, maybe they're going to develop in C# or Java, and do server side rendering of a web page from a server, and which will potentially automate any client side code that needs to be developed for that interaction. The server will take whatever method that it needs to get the HTML built, and it will just render the HTML and then return full complete HTML and whatever JavaScript might be needed on that page to a client request. And there's not much to be done on the client side. Or if there is, the maybe server side frameworks are generating. And then of course there's plenty of client side frameworks like Angular and React and so on, where there is sort of a decoupling, and that decoupling has grown a lot over the years. And it's really, I think, most incredibly powerful from a security standpoint. It gives you this ability to say, I can create a static site, and everything on my static site, everything is going to be downloaded to the client side, period. So I have this domain where I know 100% of everything that I'm putting in my static site is public domain. I'm not going to put a single thing on there that is sensitive. It won't exist. And it's static. And so, think about what is the threat vortex of a static site. Well, then we could think about things like, okay, well, what if I need dynamic information that I need to be authenticated for? And so that's where with static sites, I put everything that that is on the site, all the content that makes a website goes in bundle of files, right? And those go on. You can serve static sites from S3. And likewise, if you want to sit there and build HTML JavaScript pages on your local machine, you don't need a web server. You can go into VS Code and open an HTML file that's linked to a JavaScript. Your client browser has the ability, essentially, it's almost like downloading. It's just really just downloading the HTML file from an S3 bucket. Now they have to serve it a certain way, but it's very, very, very different from an interactive web server. And I think about, if I'm having my traditional web server, there's a lot of hacking that I could do to that. But in this context of my static site, what hacking could I do to that? I can download the everything that I'm doing is I download every single aspect of that site. But how do I get the dynamic content? I download all the static content. And if there's a need for dynamic content, then where do I put that? I put that behind a REST API, another API. And so if I have a page that needs to dynamically load, I'll have that page in my static bundle, and I can have it set up to where this page needs to be dynamically loaded. And so there's some client-side JavaScript that we'll put in there. And that client-side JavaScript will have to reach out to some server and authenticate. And one of the other really powerful things about the security model of Gemstack is that you start developing for these things. A lot of times when you're doing server-side development, you're like, okay, well, I need to get a secret and put a secret in my code. I'm going to use like all our workflows that power the Ninja site, right? I use GitHub secrets, so that way when those workflows run, our secrets are injected into that. And when you think about, if I'm going to do a static client-side bundle, what secrets can I put in there? I can't put any secrets in there. I can't even automatically inject secrets in there. I can't put any secrets in there, period, right? Everything I put in the static side of my website is public. No secrets, period, right? This is all going to get downloaded to their client. And so what that means is that while a page, may be able to have a client-side JavaScript that the developer put there that can maybe go out to an API and download dynamic content. There's no way for me as a developer to say, hey, I'm going to go into the code like I can on the server side and use my secrets that I know to authenticate an action that's like on the server side. I can say, hey, when a user comes to this page, I want a script to run that uses some secret that goes in and does something dynamic that only I should know. Right? I can't do that on the client side. What I have to do on the client side is if there is any secret that should be like, if there's a table that gets populated with, the name of Nintendo games, right? It goes to a database, gets Nintendo games and populates the page. Maybe I want that to be behind an authentication source, right? Well, if my client side is statically generated, that means that the client's only chance of of accessing that is a secret that they provide. I can't, as the developer, put any secrets in there. So I have, when someone accesses a static site, they download a file that is the entire website. There's literally nothing else. And they may see something in that code that says, oh, if I wanted to, populate this list of this table of Nintendo games that I might have on the static site, I can see that I would go to that API. And so I know where that API is, where I might find that information, but there's no secrets in the code that would give me access. And so I'm able to really abstract that. Any dynamic content I'm going to make is a API microservice on the back end, and really have a clear line in the sand about how I'm doing client-side development, how I'm doing server-side development. And that's generally now. As I started to mention before, there is starting to be some server-side componentry happening in this Gemstack world. So there's starting to be some hybrid efforts here to sometimes, want to have a static site served from a server, from a more traditional web server, as opposed to, like I said, static sites are generally, based on nothing more than like a file download. It's not really a web server as you've truly thought of it. It's more like, hey, here's more like just a file, a basic file service. So anywho, so let's look at Gatsby real quick. So I really wanted to, like, right now we're using Hugo. Hugo is awesome. Really like Hugo. There's, I think, what if we wanted to do something more advanced on the client side? We're going to make a really cool, very highly interactive application that we serve, or we've got some interactive stuff on Modern Apps, right now, right? Like we've got, we can see that there's animations that are happening, right? Ooh, I put my cursor over it, I see the shadow there, these animations, and some of these animations are JavaScript, and it's getting to be that there's primitives, increasing amount of primitives that are supported by all client-side browsers that aren't necessarily JavaScript happening on the client side. There's a lot of dynamic stuff that you can access using HTML tags that used to be like, I've got to code JavaScript, and those allow the developer of the browser to potentially be able to implement, something like an animation movement. It's getting to the point where, hey, a lot of these can be accessed with just an HTML tag, and they're delivered through sort of an API model in the client-side browser, where somebody like Google Chrome can say, how exactly do we want to make this animation happen? We used to think about it in terms of that animation happens via JavaScript, but if I'm the person who makes Chrome and we standardize a certain type of animation, we could say there's a standard HTML tag, ABC tag, and and we're going to make that part of the HTML5 standard. And now when I access that tag, it's possible for now Google Chrome and Firefox and Safari, whatever, they all have to implement the behavior that is associated with that tag, that particular standard type of animation. But how they actually do it on the back end is really, doesn't have to be JavaScript. It's a feature that's built into the browser. And so whatever programming languages that they build in the browser, they can, do that way. Yeah. And so anywho, so with Hugo, you can access all the new dynamic HTML5 stuff, and you can put any JavaScript that you want in these, right? So most dynamic stuff, like when you think about the popularity of client-side frameworks, React obviously being a huge framework, Angular being a very popular framework, those are 100% client-side frameworks. And so it highlights, you can do the most advanced dynamic stuff that you can think of in web pages using those client-side frameworks. And you can use all that stuff in a static site, right? Because it's all JavaScript that you download in advance. And so when you access those particular websites, so it's completely possible with a Hugo site to have Hugo deliver a React application, for example. So really dynamic React-based website. However, there's not a lot of that going on. And again, initially static websites weren't as focused. There were initially nobody was looking at these for more advanced functionality. Everyone's thinking, okay, the model behind static sites is really more optimal for basic sites. So a lot of the initial attempt, it's only more recently that we've been getting into more and more advanced stuff. And so you don't see a lot of examples of people doing React applications or other fancy client side JavaScript in the Hugo universe. It's not that you can't find it; it's just not especially well documented, and the Hugo is definitely not optimized for hosting React apps. You got to make some tweaks to the normal ways. It gets pretty hairy and complicated. Now, at the same time, if we're interested in doing more advanced client-side functionality, I really think that's where Gatsby really shines. Gatsby, top three. It's been definitely. And even before Next.js was on the top of the I think Gatsby was more popular than both these at one point. And it's not that it's waning in popularity. I don't think it's just that this whole area is getting a lot more popular. Yeah. Anyways, so Gatsby is still one of the top static site generating frameworks. And one thing I really like about Gatsby is if we were to want to like do more advanced client side stuff, it's great to learn more about React. And I'm not a React developer. I know a little bit about React. I played with it a touch, started to learn some, but I've never done, a lot of the stuff I've never done before, and I thought, if I really want to learn more about React, Gatsby is a great way to do it. As Gatsby takes React applications, right? That's what it is. It's really about putting React in a static site model, because React, while that React applications have always been client side, they were not necessarily designed to be delivered and packaged in the static site model, where we kind of pre-package our HTML, JavaScript content, try to pre-optimize things, and then make it available as a package of HTML5, bundle, essentially, that you download through a static site generating host, or static site host, or and so Gatsby, I think it really brings that ease of use of like, hey, I can go out in the universe, find a ton of templates, and very, very easily start with one of those templates. And then if I want to customize it to my heart's content, I can do so. But there's a couple attributes of Gatsby that I think really make that really attractive. And that Gatsby is built again with around React applications that are intended to be served in a static site capacity. But the other really, really interesting thing about Gatsby is it uses GraphQL. I like, when I think about that, I mean, GraphQL is extremely powerful. And, when I think about, some of the things we do to manage the site, if we look at things like our GitHub actions, and like how, if you get into like how the pages are built, and what you need to do for the pages, it's a lot of Golang stuff, which is great. I like Golang. I like thinking about Golang. But Golang is a little bit disconnected from client-side development, which is kind of interesting. But if I want to learn how to build and customize this Modern Apps Ninja templates that's based on Hugo, I'm really doing a lot of Hugo, like for example here, this courses. Our courses. What are the courses? Well, these courses are each a file that's in a directory, and this page has an HTML template that says it uses Golang, right? To say, hey, go to the files that are in the courses directory, and then render a card for each of them in this gallery view. And it's going to use Golang, right? If I go to the back end of source code, the source code that produces this page when built, is you're going to see some Golang stuff that'll say, go grab a range of content of stuff that's in the directory, put it in a slice, and do this and that. And there's a lot of like Golang intermingled into the HTML content and stuff to make this stuff happen. But the thing about that Golang is it doesn't run on the client side. It doesn't run at the time that someone accesses it. It runs at build time, right? So when we build this page, that's when that Golang is triggered. So it's only dynamic as of build time, and it doesn't change once it's built. It's already been built, right? And so I'm learning, hey, some Golang ways of doing that, which is kind of, it's nice because I'm learning some things about Golang, but that's also not how you typically use Golang for front end development. Now, if we take that same idea, if this were a Gatsby site and I were to go in and I were to figure out, how's this made? I would be looking at, React apps, advanced kind of JavaScript, TypeScript. I'd be looking at using GraphQL to query the content that gets rendered into this little gallery here. And I'm really interested in learning GraphQL. It's a very, very, very cool technology. So I thought, hey, playing with some Gatsby templates is a great way to start to get exposure to more advanced JavaScript, TypeScript, React applications, and a great way to get exposure to that GraphQL. And so, what's GraphQL, right? And why is it important? So GraphQL is a newer type of API, and that allows you to query data that's stored behind a web API. And so it's not exactly a REST API. I think you could, it's not that it's, I kind of think of REST, as this really generic definition, right? Like you can create anything you want, obviously there's certain attributes that have to exist, but if you want to, create a REST API, you can create a REST API that does advanced stuff. You can create a REST API that allows you to do queries, but the framework itself, doesn't specify those details. And so it really puts all the legwork on you and your development team to say, what is it that you're going to do with your API? Oh, I've got a bunch of data. And how do I want to make this accessible? If I would like to do things that other than just give the raw data, I can do that in the REST API. I can allow people, but I've got to make all the code that allows them to say query something. Whereas with GraphQL, we can allow people to do really advanced queries and data manipulation from a data source. When that data source is actually very raw. Right? I don't have to develop all that logic myself to allow people who want access to my data, or allow, let's say, me to create, something that renders here a very specific way that I want to, or have a shopping cart. Right? And it's really important in modern app development, because when we think about, one of some of the things that are hard with legacy development is like, oh, well, I'm used to having this, traditional SQL database. Well, if I'm developing something new, that's not necessarily going away. But what if I needed it less for less things? Would that be simpler? The answer is absolutely. It really empowers a lot of really robust capabilities for if I want to develop a web application that that I can get very easily. And yeah, so Graphical, it really it's like a REST API, but it allows you to be very granular in manipulating. And so when you think about, I'm sure if you've not thought about GraphQL, you may be thinking like, oh, yay, another thing I learned. I'm not even really that comfortable with REST API calls, and now there's a whole new one. Well, the coolest part about GraphQL is that this ecosystem around GraphQL needed to come into existence when everybody had that thought. Every single person who's out there making REST APIs, even experienced developers, they knew how to do REST APIs and they didn't know how to do GraphQL. So for everybody, it was an effort. There's some effort to learn, and so every implementation of GraphQL out there will have this a page somewhere where there's a graphical. So you can see this graph, the letter I and then QL. So the standard itself is GraphQL. And there's this very, very popular client-side utility called Graphical. And this is a query builder. And so one of the cool things about Graphical of GraphQL is it's pretty simple context. Once you get used to it, you get used to it pretty quickly, and pretty quickly you just start writing. You can start writing your own queries without really thinking about it. It's fairly intuitive language, a lot like structured query language is pretty intuitive. But you don't need to go figure out how to make a query, and I think this is something that's kind of like how Postman is for REST APIs. I can go here and I can play with these queries to figure them out, but Postman, it's hairy and complicated and is not standard. And does somebody actually has a vendor of an API produce something that really makes it easier to use? Well, the GraphQL is standardized around this particular goal. And so you can have client applications like this graphical app here that work consistently across any GraphQL API. And this allows you to build your queries. And so if you're thinking like, oh, hey, I've got a workflow where I want to make an API call with Graphical. Oh, that's hard. How do I do that? Well, this doesn't make it truly trivial. You still got to learn a little bit, but you go into here and you think, okay, well, if I was going to make a REST API call to the GitHub API, I would go to the REST API documentation. I would look, and it would have a bunch of stuff that looks very, very much like this, because my GraphQL schema is not very different from the REST API schema. And I've got to go through, and go through documentation, look for what it is that I want to find, look at the code example, take that code, static code example over, and then play with it until I get my REST API call the way I want, and I know what data to expect and so on. This is easier than that, right? Because look at this. This is live on GitHub. Right. This is an example of if I went to use GitHub's graphical GraphQL interface. I can come in here and I can actually sign in and say what do I want to do? Maybe I want to list repositories in an organization. You still need to know a little bit about the API. I know for myself, because for Modern Apps Learning, we make a number of queries, API calls to the GitHub API, REST API. And so I'm already kind of familiar with it. I know, if I wanted to do something like list all the repositories in an organization, I know that's under organization, right? That's where it would be under REST API, probably a good hit. And then of course, I'm looking for specific details about specific repositories for REST API. I know those are under the repository keyword. And so I can, navigate the GraphQL Explorer here very similar, and I can see very quick, and it's going to dynamically build my query for me. So if I go in here and I say a fuel, and then I want to go into domain, I can see what can I look here, and I can go through and I can, or I can just click play. What is it going to do if I do this? Oh, it automatically helped me find where I needed to go in this, because I didn't really know what's edges and node. Like you always see edges because GraphQL is unsurprisingly based on graph theory. Sometimes you'll get the messages won't be exactly right. Like this is saying I don't have authentication. And I don't think that's exactly the error here. I think the error here in this case is that I didn't put enough information in here. But nonetheless, let's see, actually, or maybe, so I'm going to go forget that. And we'll say, I want to see I don't want to see the ID. I want to see the domain maybe. Let's see if that changes things here. And I'm still getting, so that's not a good example. That's one of the hard things about picking random examples. So I'm logging for a fuel, and what was I doing? Let's go first 10, and let's go ahead and get rid of that. Parse error. So I messed that up already. Yeah. So I was randomly clicking things, and I happened to, this is not entirely trivial, right? You still have to, learn a little bit about, get a little comfort in navigating these the schema and doing it. But the really cool thing is with just a little bit of experience starting to play with Graphical, you can really start to see like, okay, well, when would I use this, right? It's on the occasions that I'm building a workflow where I need to make an API call. And so I can come in and craft that code. I can use something like this to make my query, and then you just copy and paste this, your query into some static boilerplate for in your code, and then you're using Graphical instead of REST API, right? And so again, now this is better if I should actually be whiteboarding a little bit more here, but if you can imagine, let's say that I have let's not imagine, let's just show this, right? So where's my Strapi? Let's look at my Strapi server here. Where's do I have it running already? Let me see if I've already got it running. So Strapi is what's called the headless content management system, which is rather than getting into those details specifically, it's a way to make REST APIs on the server side that provide that basically will essentially create a database and make it accessible as a RESTful API, so you can put it on your backend. So that's where Strapi is. And let me just see, do I have Strapi running already? So my front end, that's my Gatsby. Where's my Strapi? Is this Strapi? Let me stop and start it. See, come on. Why is this? There we are. So what was that running? Yep. So this is my Strapi. So this is a REST API that I have running on the back end, and on the other side of this, I have a Gatsby, just the basic starter Gatsby template, and I've got some REST API stuff happening from this Strapi web server. So let me go and I'll show you what I have going on Strapi here. So Strapi is a very, very popular new open source thing that is, if you're familiar with like web content management systems, and you may have heard things like Drupal, which big companies like VMware, I think, use that to manage like the big VMware.com websites, and a whole bunch of different teams have able to log in and manage their content on these big websites. That's been the traditional way of doing things for a while. And now that's starting to evolve towards the next generation. And Strapi is one of these next generation solutions for that. It's a big open source initiative, and it's really cool. If you think, hey, you know, I want to play with something, maybe in the past you've gone into something like Microsoft Access or who knows what to like build a little database app. Well, Strapi is really great at allowing you to do that. And not only it's just got a like content builder. So what do we have? We just, you know, products. I can tell this that I want the backend to be SQL or MySQL or NoSQL or Mongo or whatever else. I can come in here and point and click my database tables together. And it's not only going to put those into whatever database that I have running behind it in the appropriate format. So whether it's a NoSQL database or a SQL database, it will manage that. It's also going to automatically create both a REST and a GraphQL API and serve those APIs. It has a controller that it creates for every every one of these content types that you build. So if I want to have an e-commerce website, right, it needs things like products. So here I created a product. You know, you want to add another field. Okay, I want a text field. I mean, Strapi is awesome. Like, and you do this, and it automatically starts serving the database for you. Yeah, and so then, and it also has there's also a plugin in the Gatsby ecosystem that helps Gatsby. I connected my Gatsby front end. I just ran through the very most basic starter template for Gatsby and included the Strapi plugin, and my Gatsby can now connect to all these REST APIs. I mean, it's easy cake. Didn't have to do any coding. It was really some very basic instructions I had to follow. So if you go to the Gatsby Starter, I can get into some more detail on that if people are interested, but you know, easy thing to do. And now, you know, I've also got my Gatsby running here, and you can see Gatsby natively runs with Graphical. And so this is the Gatsby Starter default. If you want to go and do this, it'll take 5 minutes to have this up and running, right? The starter, and it comes with this graphical interface. And now I populated my graphical stuff here by the fact that I was able to connect it to that Strapi. So I created some of that Strapi stuff. We saw very easy to deal with Strapi. And then I added the GraphQL plugin to Strapi. So then I can take a client like this and just connect it. And it made it even easier that Gatsby has a plugin already that really even enhances. Now you can learn, it doesn't need to know about anything more than the fact that GraphQL is a standard. But if your client side, you know, knows a little bit more about some of your server side stuff, you can add a little extra special sauce onto that too. So that's kind of nice. So now I can go to my own Explorer, right? So again, so I created, right? This is so here's a typical thing for, say, an e-commerce, right? I have a product, right? And you know, let's say I have a shirt of a particular type, and that shirt of that model might be available in a number of different colors and sizes. And so I have this products table, and it has a relationship to my variants table. And I mean, Strapi is so cool because I can create this. If I wanted this to be on MongoDB backend and have the relationships created in the appropriate way, like I'm personally more familiar with how to do that in a structured query language environment as opposed to a NoSQL environment. And I don't even have to think about that because I just can point and click my way to how I want it. And Strapi takes care of how it gets implemented on the back end to the database. So anyways, so right now I'm using SQLite behind this just because it's really simple, but I could be using Mongo or any other thing. So the variant here, I can see size and color. So I have a relationship between products and variants, right? And so in the REST API world, you know, let's say I wanted to find how many red, let's look at some of our content here, right? So I've got categories, hats, hoodies, and shirts. So let's look at our product. You know, let's say I want to see how many I++ hats that I have in the color white. So I can go into my variants here visually. Since I'm an admin, I can go right into my admin. I can see I++ hats. I can see here that's the color white. I have it in the back end. I have it depicted as the hex code. It'll display differently on the front end. In the back end, I can see here that I have a quantity 1 of white colored I++ hats. And I also have black I++ hats and green I++ hats. And when I get into shirts and stuff like that, I have different sizes, large, medium, and small. So let's just say, like, here's another example. Like if I wanted to see how many white colored code block hoodies that I have in the size large, right? How would I get that information typically from a REST API? I have to go and where did my Strapi go? I had Strapi up. Where did Strapi go? Oh, here it is. So normally to get to this, I'd have to query the products table and get some ID for, I'm interested in my I++ hoodie. So I need to find information about the variants of the I++ hoodie. So maybe I'll have to query the products table to get a list of products so I can find the ID of the I++ hoodie, and then take that and make another query to my variants table. And generally I'm going to have my variants table. What am I going to have it return me back? It's not very granular about what it can return back. And so it's probably going to return back a big chunk of JSON data, and I'm going to have to write some more logic to parse through that JSON data to get this very specific information. Now, on the other hand, with GraphQL, I can really go through and go through products. Let's just go, let's see, Strapi product. And I don't want to actually even do this on the fly because I'm still gaining experience with this and I don't want to mess it up and derail the example. The point here being is in one single query, I can say, I would like to find exactly what I wanted. I would like to know exactly what quantity of white, large sized I++ shirts or hoodies that I have in one query. I don't have to make a bunch of different queries. I don't have to parse through any data. I don't have to receive a bunch of data that I didn't want. I can build this query to say, I want something, start off with the products table. And really just like I could with a junction or union query with structured query language, but I can go through and say, look at from the products table with product ID X, show me results that come from the variance table if they meet criteria, if they're white, they're I++, and their size large, and just do that in one simple query, and it will just return back that value that I want. And I mean, it's just so powerful as our customers. It's not just, this isn't just a company call, but as companies who are building web applications and so on, move into the cloud native world, right? Like there's definitely some things we need structured query language on, but we know if there's a weight that comes with that, right? Where we have new things that help make SQL stuff more distributed. We have things that are getting distributed SQL out there to where I've got implementations of SQL that can handle a lot of multi-site, high availability stuff that I need. But it's still kind of heavyweight. Like, what if I could build my new application to where I can get the information I need from a simple API, and then my application and my microservice can be stateless, right? I don't have to have it tied to getting to getting the to a more traditional style database or even a non-traditional style database. If I can get everything I need through my REST API, being able to deploy and manage and really operate and update and really keep my web application at the latest, greatest, best in the simplest way, if I can get more of the information. So this doesn't take legacy data methods away. And right behind your GraphQL API, right, you're going to have databases and stuff, right? This is a way to allow your client side code to be a whole lot simpler and easier and a lot easier to deploy, or anything that has to reach into the backend to gather data, and make it be able to do a whole lot more different, more robust, more stuff without needing to, like in the REST API world, said if I wanted to, I could serve data like what I'm talking about. I could make a way with a REST API to where someone could essentially get a result like that. Like I want to know how many white t-shirts I have in what quantity of those. I can make a REST API that makes it simple to query that data, but I'm gonna have to write a lot of code, custom code just for me, just as one-time use, to make that possible for that particular use case. Whereas to here, I've got all that power. We don't have to build a bunch of it. And if I did that REST API example, I'd have to make the optimizations for every different type of query that I wanted people to be able to do, right, in the REST API app server that I was building. Whereas this, just out of the box, as part of the standard, has tons and tons and tons of super insanely powerful stuff you can do to enable the developers to do really powerful things far more simply and far more quickly. So yeah, I do encourage. I really want to let this call be, at the direction of what feedback that I hear is interesting. Like we could, if we wanted to next week, go through step by step together, looking at setting up the setting up a Gatsby template, or setting up something like the Strapi dashboard. I don't know that everybody wants to like go through it step by step or something like this, that is more of a quick walkthrough. But I definitely do encourage, Strapi is easy, and you don't even need to have a backend REST API stuff in order to play with Gatsby templates on the front end. The Gatsby is super easy to get up and running. You can go to the Gatsby documentation site and be up and running with that starter Gatsby Starter bundle in a few minutes. If you want to use the Gatsby Starter bundle, or if you're interested, hey, I'd be interested in making a blog site or something for myself, right? You can go and look for Gatsby themes and templates, and there's tons and tons of very nicely polished stuff for all sorts of various purposes out in the Gatsby universe. And then one of the things I like about Gatsby we're looking at as well is there's tons and tons of JavaScript web apps. There's tons of existing web apps that, let's say, in the React ecosystem is massive. And so it's like, if I want to, build something, some new web application, the right approach to do it is say, okay, what is out there already, right? I want to build something that builds a nice table or, a widget, or I was looking at one like a pop-up window. If you want to have a pop-up window, there's tons and tons of packages out there that make it really simple and have a lot of really common sense things that would be really hard to do, or at least take time and coding to do, independently about how you might want to have a pop-up window that might pop up on your website. You go out, you find an existing JavaScript library or an existing React application that does that, that's open source, and you build on that. That's typically how you want to do it. And that's one thing I like about Gatsby, is it's really well optimized for being able to go and find a React application and bring it into your to take your site to the next level. Whereas with Hugo, it's definitely a lot more challenging, just a lot more complicated, and a lot less documentation and support if I wanted to go out and grab a React application and incorporate it into my own site. So I think, in terms of being able to customize your template with a lot of the huge open source community stuff that's out there, there's a lot more possibilities with Gatsby. So yeah, hopefully that's a good interesting information. I'm going to play a little bit more with some of these Gatsby templates, and if it's something that's interest to the community, we'll have some future calls where we look at and there's other templates that I want to play with too. After we play with Gatsby more, I'd love to experiment a little bit with next.js templates. We don't have to go super deep into each of these. It's one of the great things about, these are all pretty simple to play with. If we just want to dabble and see what it's all about, learn a little bit about it. There's a new one coming that I like, that is called astro.js. There's another interesting thing that some development frameworks themselves are starting to produce static site generation. So like one of the new big React, let's say, alternatives is called Svelte, right? And Svelte itself can do static site generation, but not from the perspective of a static site generator. It's a big, framework, a really big framework, just like React. It's a direct kind of competitor alternative to React, and it's really becoming, it's kind of interesting. It's like now through that approach, that's a whole new approach to potentially be able to make static sites, or you could build, Svelte apps and include them in something like Gatsby. And one of the nice things about, there's another new one that we'll look at later called Astro.js, is it's built to be able to support any of these new client-side frameworks, whether it's React or Svelte or Angular or have you. I know we've reached the top of the hour. I should have probably paused a little sooner if there's any questions, comment, but I'm happy to hang around and chit chat if anybody has any questions. Otherwise, thanks everybody for joining today.
Thanks.
Thank you.